Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Chapter 9 for the IT Fundamentals Plus CompTIA exam review. We're again going through the Total Seminars all-in-one exam guide written by Scott Jernigan and Mike Myers. This is Chapter 9, Using and Managing Application Software. There's a lot of information and a lot of slides that we're going to be going through in this chapter. And honestly, there's probably more memorization in this chapter than there have been in the first 8. So it's just a lot to introduce and a lot to know. So feel free to look through these slides over and over again. I've got some nice grids and terminology here throughout these slides that we're going to be talking about. And it's good to know these both forward and backward before you take your IT Fundamentals Plus exam for the U61 version. Our chapter objectives is that we will learn how to run applications. We will know how to install and uninstall applications. We will identify common applications and their uses and describe application licensing and distribution. The first thing I want to talk about before we get into how to use and manage an application software is making sure we know the difference between an application and a program. Now, an application, or an app, as we say sometimes in a shorter version, enables a user to do something with the computer. An application isn't involved in running or maintaining the computer. So honestly, you can get rid of all applications and a computer is still going to run and maintain itself great. But the applications are really the reason why we're using the computer. So these are things that allow us to do something with the computer. Now we really have two types of applications. I'm going to come back to these and I want to talk about the difference between an application and a program. And honestly, I'll apologize now. I'm going to probably intermix these as I talk about them. But again, an application is when you do something with the computer. A program is software that involves running or maintaining the computer. A computer could not run accurately or efficiently without programs, but they can run without applications. Now, these two types of applications that we're going to talk about here, monolithic and end-tier. A monolithic application is an app that stores all software data on a single computer, and no internet access is needed. However, an end-tier application is an app that stores all software data on different servers, and the user connects via an internet browser. It is more beneficial than monolithic because, again, you can access this application from any device and any computer as opposed to the one that it's stored on, which is what a monolithic would be. But an end-tier, and there's different tiers for an end-tier application, but again, it uses the internet, whereas a monolithic does not. So let's talk about how do we run an application. And some of this will be pretty common sense. You've done it most of your life when you deal with computers, but we're going to go through the different OSs as well. For Windows, you can open the Start menu and select the item within that. You can click on the search bar, which is down here on the bottom near the taskbar, and you can start typing. And when the desired app pops up, you can press Enter or click on it. You could double click on a shortcut or click on a pin icon down in the taskbar. Once you open your Start menu, you can also hit any of these tiles as well. But there's a lot of different ways that you can open a Windows application. For a Mac, you would want to choose the app from the dock. Remember what I talked about before, how it's kind of like a 3D effect, how it gets a little bigger wherever your cursor is, and this one's over the iTunes right now. If there's a certain app that you want, you can just simply click on it on the dock. You can click the Launchpad button on the dock and then find the desired app. You can search using a Spotlight, which is their search method on a Mac Apple computer, or you can go to Finder, click Go, and then Applications, and all of those will help you to be able to find the application that you want and click on it to open. The third OS I want to talk about is Linux. And Linux, this is for Ubuntu Unity. You can click on the icon in the launcher. Remember, the launcher is over here on the side. You can click on the icon over here to be able to do that. You can click on the dash button and then select an application to run. This dash button, you can see all the different applications on here so that you can click the one that you want. And that's what you'll see on the exam, one of these major ones. Now, these things do look similar as we work through them, but they're a little bit different according to each OS. Your grid button down here at the bottom of your launcher will show you the most frequently used apps. apps, and those will also maybe possibly give you the one that you're looking for. All right, and then finally for Chrome OS, you can either click on an app down here on the shelf, or you can click on the launcher button, which will give you all the desired apps in the system, and then you click on that one. Now I also want to talk about running an application on a smartphone. And again, most people know how to do this. You can either tap the icon on the screen. If they ask you to enter credentials, you would need to do that to be able to show permission. And then do know that some apps on a phone do stop running if the focus is switched or if your phone locks. An example of that is YouTube. If you're playing a video on YouTube or a song on YouTube and then your phone goes to sleep or you go to a different application, it will stop running. Now I believe there's a subscription or there's an option that you could purchase to make it keep running in the background, but for free users, it will stop running. Okay, switching between applications. And remember, you can have multiple apps open at the same time, but only one of them has the focus. And on a Windows computer, on a desktop computer, it's usually the one that's in the front that you can see first. For a phone, it's the one that you're seeing that's on the screen, and it's the same for a Mac and a Linux and a Chrome. It's the one that's always in the foreground of all the different applications. If you want to switch between applications, one thing is that you can just click on the open app in the taskbar. Down on the taskbar, you can see which ones are open and just simply click on it and it will maximize that one so you can see it, or the dock or the launcher or the shelf, depending on which OS that you're talking about. If you see the app, if it's not maximized and you see the app somewhere on the screen, you can just click on it and it will become the focus app and it will come in the foreground. For a window, you have some shortcuts that you can use. Alt-Escape will swap the focus, and Alt-Tab will cycle through thumbnails of open apps, and that's the one I use the most. If I'm doing Alt-Tab, you can see I can cycle through whichever application I want, so that way that's the one that's going to come into view. There we go. For a Mac OS, you can click Alt-Command, and that will cycle through thumbnails of open apps. For Chrome, you can either do Control-Tab or Alt-Tab. That moves through some open tabs. And for a smartphone, you do have an app button or a switcher button, and you can see which apps that you want, and then you select it. It's always important, obviously, whenever you're doing something that's editing or you're creating a document or creating a file, that you do save your work. It's essential if you want to use it again. You've got some different options. You can click either Save or Save As. I want to make sure you know the difference between this. If your document has already been saved in the past, you can click on Save, and it will just simply overwrite that file with your new version. If you are wanting to create a brand new file for the first time, you would want to do Save As, because you're trying to tell the computer what kind of file is it and what do you want to call it. However, if you do have an existing file and you're wanting to create a newer version but not overwrite the existing file, you can also do Save As, call it something else, draft number 2, draft number 3, whatever it is, and that way you can see both versions side by side and be able to use that to compare. Your hotkey for this is just Control S. That's automatically going to either pop up your Save As document if it hasn't been saved before, Save As window if it hasn't been saved before, or it'll just overwrite it right away without having to do anything else. Along with saving your work, you also need to make sure you understand how to exit your work. You can either do File, Exit, or File, Quit. You can either click on the X in the upper right-hand corner or just Alt F4. If this file has not been saved by you, then it'll prompt you and ask you, do you want to save your work? When you do any of these options, a prompt will come up and say, do you want to save this? And you can click yes to overwrite the old one, or click no, and that version will literally disappear and you just lost your work, or you didn't want to save that work, and that's fine if that's your option, if that's your choice. Installing new applications. Obviously, from time to time, we do want new applications on our computer or on our mobile device or on our phone. So one way that you can do it is you can acquire it from several different sources. You can literally go to a retail store that offers software and applications, and you can go there and buy it. You would then have to bring it home and probably enter in a code or put in an installation CD or something like that. You can download retail applications from the internet. You can do it from a certain website and then download it, purchase it through them and download it from there. You can also install from a specific app store associated with an OS. If it's Windows, you have a Microsoft store. If it's a Mac OS, you can do that Apple App Store, and the App Store generally does install it automatically, which is nice. Let's talk about specifically for Windows. If you're doing it for Windows, typically you're going to have some sort of removable media, which is probably either a CD or possibly a flash drive or something like that. It's going to start a setup wizard, which they will then go through, and you'll go through and you'll choose what your options are, and eventually it will install it into your system. You would want to once you have installed it, you will see an executable file. That's something we're going to visit later on. And you'll need to double click on the downloaded executable file, and then it will either start up or it will continue to prompt you for the final setups. If it's a compressed file, which you can see over here as like a little zip file, which is what we call that, a zip file, you would want to double click and that would unpack it. It would basically unzip the file. You would then be able to see all of the different things that you need, and then you would find the executable file within that and allows you to be able to run it as normal or install it if you need to. Now, the thing I want to make sure we also talk about before I move on is that, again, you would want to do this if you are an administrator of your computer or of the device. If you are logged in as a standard user and not administrator, it will prompt you with something called user access control. User access control is a security prompt that will activate to ensure that the appropriate user requested this application. Very important there. So you want to make sure that you are either logged in as an administrator or you have access to the administrator username and password. It stops unnecessary downloads or unnecessary applications to download to your computer, which could cause harm and possibly infect it. Let's talk about a Mac. If you want to install a desktop application in a Mac OS, you can again install from a disk or download. It's going to prompt you for that installation. If it's a zip format, it does need to be unpacked either as a PKG or a DMG file. PKG files should install without a problem. They didn't install automatically, but a DMG file will prompt you for a drag to applications. You'll need to move it over. You can also install an app from an online store. Now, an online store is what we talked about with Windows 8. They were the first dedicated online store instead of having to download a version from the internet or from an actual retail store. You have a true online store for that OS. Windows, Mac, Linux, all of the distros, and Chrome have a dedicated online app store, and you can access that online store from the OS. You just simply purchase the app and you're set. Also, you can use web-based applications. Now, the thing about web-based applications is there's nothing to download. You don't have to install anything. You don't have to download it. You just have to access it using a browser. So you just open up Edge or Chrome or Firefox or whatever your preferred browser is, and then you can access this. These web-based applications are sometimes called SaaS, which is Software as a Service. Some of them are free, and some of them do have subscriptions. It just depends on which ones that you're doing with. Usually they require an account with the vendor, and again, it's either free or not. Google Drive apps is one, and Microsoft Office Online is another example of a web-based application. But you do need internet to be able to access these. It's important to make sure we understand what updating these applications are. Whenever you have an application, those need to be as up-to-date as possible to make it work. And so many apps will check periodically for updates and prompt you when needed, and then you can download it like that. Some will require a manual check, and how you would do that is you would go into Help. As you can see this person, you can go into Help and check for updates, and it will then check to see if you do have the most updated file, and when it checks the internet, if it sees a newer version on there, it will say that a newer version is available, and then you can choose to download it or not. Some subscription apps, these web-based applications, will update also automatically, which is nice because you don't have to go out and buy the newest version. It will automatically do that. And some content-rich apps like games will require updates to continue playing. Keep in mind this word that I have at the very top of this, updating applications or patch. The main purpose of an update or of a patch is to correct a problem in an installed application. Windows automatically downloads app updates through Windows Updates, and it's important to make sure that we do have the most up-to-date information, especially when it comes to our OS, because updating an app and updating your OS is important to have the most, to make sure you have the safest guards against possible viruses or other malware out there that could harm your computer. Another thing I want to talk about now that we're here in the help section is another thing that you can possibly do is that an app version can be found by clicking on help and about. So this person clicked on help, and if you didn't want to do check for updates, if you went to about, you would be able to see what the version number is. Let me show an example. I have Adobe Acrobat open right here. Here's Adobe Acrobat. We're going to talk about common applications later on this chapter. If I go up here to help and click on About Adobe Acrobat, you see all the different things that is important, which is great. But then at the very, very top, you can see what the version number is of this. 20.006.242.43423. This is our version number and the different version numbers of the different things that Adobe Acrobat has with it. But this is great because it helps you to be able to easily see what you have and if it's the newest. Now, along with installing apps, sometimes we do have apps that we no longer want or apps that aren't there. We talked about this before, but an easiest way to remove applications, especially from a Windows desktop, is you just go to Control Panel, Programs and Features, you choose which application that you don't want, and then you click Uninstall. And that's what this person did for this one. They have Borderlands, the pre-sequel, they don't want it anymore, they highlighted it, and then they went up here and will uninstall the program. These are steps that you would see from the icon view of Control Panel. Control Panel has a couple different ways that you can look at it. One is just the icon view. Another way that you can do that is what we call the category view. If it's a category view, it's a little bit different, but it's very similar. You can go to Control Panel, Programs, Uninstall a Program, or you can skip a step and click Uninstall a Program right underneath Programs. You'll be able to see a list of it, and you can just remove it from that computer if it's that way as well. But that's for Windows. For a modern Windows app, which again is that App Store that we've talked about, you would go to the Start menu, you would right-click on the app and just simply select Uninstall, and it would go away that way. If it's a Mac computer, you would drag the application from the applications list to the trash can, and that will remove the application from a Mac. Linux, you would find the app in the installed apps and click Remove, and that's what this graphic is. They found this Isle Riot Solitaire. They don't want it. They highlighted it. This is in the apps. This is under the installed tabs, and then they click Remove, and this will go away. And for a Chrome OS, in your launcher, you would find the app. You just simply click Uninstall, and it would remove. Now, with applications, they all are run on one of three different platforms. Let's talk about what a platform is. The platform is the hardware on which an OS runs. And there's three kinds of hardwares on which an OS runs. You have a desktop, you have a mobile, and you have web-based. Now, these applications can be created. If someone's creating a new application, they have to decide whether this is something they will download on a computer, something that you'll download onto a phone, or if it's a web-based application. If it's desktop, it's software that runs on a desktop OS, such as Windows and Mac OS or Linux or Chrome or things like that. If it's mobile, it's software that's designed to run on a mobile OS, such as Android and iOS. And if it's web-based, this is software that's accessed through a web browser, also known as that SaaS, Software as a Service. Now we're going to go through some common applications and their uses. The first one that I want to talk about is productivity. Now, when we say software type, we're trying to find what the software is designed for what specific purpose. And there are 4 different specific purposes of a software type. Excuse me, there are 5 different specific purposes of a software type. The first one is productivity. Productivity software or productivity apps are designed to help users do productive tasks. So we're going to go through some examples of that so you can identify what these are. These are the things that it'd be good to have memorized, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, because there's a lot of things that are important. But a lot of it will be just as long as you understand the types, then you'll know which categories they would fall under if you're familiar with these types of applications. You do have a word processing application. This is all under productivity software. Word processing is like Microsoft Word, Pages, Google Docs, LibreOffice Writer, and the such. You also have, along with word processing, you have spreadsheets. Spreadsheets would be like Microsoft Excel, Numbers on a Mac, LibreOffice Calc, or Google Sheets. All of those would be considered productivity. You're using these applications to get something done, to be productive. Others are email. Email is a productivity software. Outlook, Mail, Evolution, or Gmail. You can have a database, such as Access, FilmMaker, and LibreOffice Base. These are all database applications. And you can have PDF viewers and creators, such as Adobe Acrobat and Adobe Reader. These are, again, things that help you get stuff done, productivity. And then finally, we do have presentation software, such as PowerPoint, Keynote, Impress, or Google Slides. These are all productivity applications. Desktop publishing software, Publisher and Quark Express. Personal information managers such as Outlook and Evolution, and remote desktop software, Windows Remote Desktop. This is where one person can go into your computer if you have a problem, and they can literally take over your computer for a good reason and to find out what the problem is and how they can fix it. Instead of them coming to your house and doing it, they can do it remotely. But all of those are ways that you can get things done. So those are productivity software. The next type of common application that I want to talk about is collaboration. Collaboration helps people communicate and work with one another. It also helps computers share information. It's usually for a business, but it's whenever you're working together with somebody else. One is an online workspace, such as Office Online, Microsoft SharePoint, or Google Docs. These are all ways that people can work together on a document. So again, it's collaboration. You could also argue that some of these would fit under productivity, but specifically, this is so people can work together. So collaboration. Document storage and sharing, such as OneDrive and Google Drive. Screen sharing screen sharing software like Windows Remote Assistance, and you can even have a built-in video conferencing software. The video conferencing softwares like Citrix GoToMeeting, Zoom, Google Hangouts, or Google Meet. There's a lot of different ones that you can use, but again, these are where people are working together, so it's collaboration. Instant messaging software, old ones, but Yahoo Messenger and AOL Instant Messenger. And again, email is also in collaboration. You're not just emailing yourself, you're emailing other people. It allows you to be able to work together. The third type that I want to talk about is utility. Now, utility software are utilities that help keep the computer running smoothly and help manage and distribute files. Utility software are anti-malware, Norton Internet Security, Symantec Endpoint Protection, McAfee Virus Scan, Malwarebytes, and Windows Defender. These are all ways that your computer is being run, helping run smooth and helping manage and distribute the files. And the software firewalls, Windows Firewall, and Norton Firewall. Others are diagnostic maintenance software like CheckDisk, error checking, optimized drives, and compression software, WinZip, and compression features built into some OSs. And I was wrong, there are only 4 types. And the 4th type is specialized. In specialized software, these are apps designed to appeal to a specific segment of the population. These are some examples that only help certain people according to probably their profession. Computer-aided design, called CAD, is AutoCAD is an example of that. You see that a lot on Apple computers because those are where the visual and the computer graphics come into play a lot more. Graphic design, such as Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator. Medical, such as MedClarity, Cario, and Accountable. These are specific medical applications for the medical profession. Scientific profession would use something called LabVIEW, Mathematica, MATLAB, and Origin. Financial people would want to use an application such as Quicken, TurboTax, Peachtree Accounting, and QuickBooks. And even gamers. These are some old games, but The Sims, World of Warcraft, Candy Crush, or any other games out there that would be used is a specialized segment of the population that they need these applications to be able to do what they want to do. And then entertainment such as Texture, Spotify, iTunes, and Windows Media Player. So these are all specialized to help you be able to do what you want to do in that specialized track. All right, and then there's 5 different file types that I want to talk about. Now, one of the things that we did last chapter was talked about the path of your files and your folders, and usually it started with a C:\\/ and then it went through the different files and the folders, and then it ended with a specific file. We talked about how mine, the one I had on there, was slideshow.ppt, and PPT was for a PowerPoint. Well, again, each extension is important to make sure that we know. It's usually 3 characters followed by a period. And so the period is first, and then you have 3 characters after it, typically letters. The PPT, the .ppt, was one extension. We have 5 different file extension types that we're going to get into. We have executable, compressed, audio video is together in one, image, and documents. Again, more memorization for you to know for the U61 exam. It's good to know each and every one of these. First, we're going to talk about executable. Now, an executable file, we mentioned it already earlier, but this allows you to be able to open a file. It's part of the OS itself, or a part of the application, or part of the installation package. Some ones that go along with that is .app, .bat, .exe. That's probably the most common one that you would see. It's an executable file, exe. .msi is another very common one out there. It's specifically used for Windows. And .scexe. Another type of file type that you would see is for compression. We mentioned how you can combine a whole bunch of things together and compress it into one file. It's going to be smaller than the space of each of them individually. And so these are a group of files into a single compressed file. And there's a lot of different schemes that we could look at. Zip is usually the universal one that's built into operating systems. But remember, they do have to be decompressed or unpacked in order to access the files that are stored with them. As soon as you extract or decompress or unpack, it's going to go to the normal file size instead of the compressed file size. Here's some examples of a compression file. Now you're going to see some common ones in here. Usually has the letters Z for zip in it. One is 7-zip or 7Z. DMG, this is a good one to know. DMG is used for specifically a Mac. gzip, again, it's got the zip in it, just like the one up above. ISO, jar, and RAR. I always remembered ISO because if you go to Facebook or if you go online and you see someone that says ISO umbrella, that means in search of umbrella. They're looking for something. They're looking for something and someone else can help them out. So remember, when you're compressing files, you need to look for and find all of the different files that you want to compress together. So if you can remember that ISO does stand for in search of, you would then look for those files and compress them. And then you have 4 of them, or excuse me, 3 of them that do end in R. You have JAR, RAR, TAR. Those all go together. So I always remember all the R's are compression. Let me go back. We have JAR, RAR, and TAR. Those are all compression formats. And finally, you have the most famous one. It is zip. The next type of file type is audio and video. And remember, these are files containing either audio or video files. Most of these are compressed because they will take up a lot of room. There's not really a single standard for each one of these. It really depends on what the playback software needs to be able to play it, and it helps you to be able to know what they are. So let's take a look at what these audio and video extensions look like. Now for specifically audio, one of them is AAC, Advanced Audio Coding, FLA, Free Lossless Audio Codec, and M4A. And notice every single one of these do have the letter A, and that doesn't mean every extension with the letter A is automatically audio, so it's good to have these memorized, but AAC is a good one to know, and then FLA and M4A. Some other ones are MP3. Most people, I think, will identify that with a song or with an audio file. WAV, W-A-V, is another one that's pretty common on the internet. If you were to download songs, you could download it as a WAV file. And also MID or MIDI. There used to, along with an MP3 player, they used to also have a MIDI player. It is a musical instrument digital interface that can be an audio file. So those are the ones for audio. Along with this category, we're also grouping in all the video files. Video would be AVI and FLV. AVI is fairly popular. FLV is for using a flash video. MP4, now don't get that confused with MP3. MP3 is audio only. MP4 uses video. And you also have MPEG and MPG, and then WMV. WAV is an audio file, but WMV is a video file because of the V in all those. The next type of file type is image formats, and these are files that store images such as photos. And you really have two types of image formats that you can have. You have raster and you have vector. Raster is typically pixel based, contains color and detail information within each pixel, and it's like digital photography. It uses raster image formats. For vector, it's very math based instead of vector based. The dimensions of the curves, lines, and the different things, and you can resize it with no loss of clarity, and illustrations are best with vector. So digital photography is what we typically see with raster files, whereas illustrations, what people draw, or people draw either by hand or on a graphic computer, would be vector. So some different image extensions. The first one is BMP, and I always remember that it's short for bitmap. Typically, whenever you're doing a paint file, if you're familiar with paint, you're going to save it under BMP, but that is for a single picture or an image. GIF, graphics file interchange, is another one. That is for, I know we typically think about a GIF or a GIF, however you want to say it, would be like moving. It almost looks like it's a video, but remember, it's a bunch of pictures that are stuck together. So it's a bunch of pictures for images. And also JPEG and JPG is another one for image formats. Some other ones that are popular are PNG and also TIF and TIFF. These are all image formats. And the last one is documents. And again, these are types of data files that would be created in a business-oriented app. TXT is kind of short for text, and when you think about text, you're thinking about text on a piece of paper or a document. So remember, TXT is a document format. RTF stands for rich text format, another one that is widely accepted. That is in a document. DOC or DOCX is typically what you would use for Microsoft Word. XLS and XLSX are for Excel. Now, I know you wouldn't typically put it under document, but it doesn't fit any of the other ones, and it's for productivity. So whenever we print it off, we are printing off a document because it's got information and numbers and formulas and things like that. PPT is the one we mentioned before. That is for PowerPoint. That is also underneath the document format. And then finally, PDF. PDF is, again, a default format for Adobe Acrobat. PDFs are great because sometimes if you have a presentation and then you go somewhere to another computer or another OS and you open it, it looks wrong. PDF is where you can save it and then it will open up exactly like you want to on no matter whose computer it is, plus no matter what operating system you use. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is software licensing. Before we do that, again, there was a lot of information on those last couple slides. We talked about the different types of software. We also talked about the different file types or file extensions. Feel free to review that at your own leisure, but it's important to know each and every one of those pretty well before you go into the IT Fundamentals plus U61 exam. Software licensing, whenever you purchase software, again, you want to make sure you know what kind of software it is and how it's licensed. One thing is that the users will have to agree to the EULA. Now, typically whenever you open a piece of software for the very first time after it's installed, you will have a whole bunch of technical jargon that you need to scroll down and then say, I accept the terms. The EULA stands for End User Licensing Agreement. These are terms that a user has to agree to before being able to use the software. It'll tell you how it should be used, and you shouldn't violate those rights. I know a lot of people don't read that. There is a lot of technical things in there, and if something were to happen, then they have that to back them up to discontinue the product or to remove it or to take it away from you. You have some different types of software. One is called freeware. This is software that you can download at no cost. It's exactly what it sounds like. Freemium is a little bit different. It is free, but it's just the basic version. If you want to get all the features of that particular one, you have to pay. But they're going to try to lure you in by giving you a basic version for free and let you see all the different things that you can't do, so that way you then pay them money so you can do them. So it's kind of a little bit of a tactic to get you to shell out the money. Shareware is where it's a free trial version, but you must purchase it to get permanent access. So it's going to be, you can only use it for 30 days or 60 days, and then it runs out. Then you can't use it anymore. So again, you usually have all full features, but then it's for a limited time. Commercial is software that must be purchased, typically not returnable. The two types of these licensing are either open source or closed source. Closed source are where developers keep the software code a secret, but typically open source is where you can do whatever you want to it, and the code is made public, and you can copy, modify, or even create new versions. Public domain is software that is not owned by any specific person. It's typically open source, so you can use it any way that you want, and it's free for everyone. And then finally, proprietary is where the app clearly belongs to a company or an individual who has the rights to it, typically closed source. Two types of licensing. You can either have a single user license or a multi-user license, depending on what you're doing with it. If you're buying an application for software, you need to make sure you understand, are you buying it just for you, or a limited number of people to use it, or are you buying it for a company or a school or a large group of people? Single use allows users to install the app on a single device or a small fixed number of devices, whereas multi-use allows users to install the app on several devices within their network. And finally, the last thing we're going to talk about is product keys and activation. Once you purchase or you download a piece of software, it's going to want both of these, product key and activation. Product keys verify that the application will work. It's a minor theft deterrent, and it's more of just a quality code these days. It's not used as much, but it's a unique string of letters or numbers that identifies your copy of the app. It typically prevents people from sharing their copy with others. But then activation requires either online or by telephone code that puts the user and software into a central database. This really does prevent theft, prevents you from sharing your application with a neighbor or a friend who doesn't have to pay for it. But it is very irritating to people who change computers a lot, because then you can't always bring it over to a new computer, because then when you try to, it'll say that it already belongs to this other computer. All right, that's it for chapter 9, dealing with the different types of ways to use an application and how you can do it. If you have any questions, feel free to put it down in the comments below. I'm happy to respond, and let's go into the questions for chapter 9. Feel free to go back and review anything you want to before we go through these questions. We've got 10 questions that we're going to go over the things that we talked about. Now, these review questions, as always, are not comprehensive. This is just kind of a little pick and choose of the things that we talked about as we go through it, but hopefully this helps you to be able to kind of quiz yourself to see how well you are able to understand some random questions that I picked out. Number 1, where in Windows 8.1 can you browse installed applications? Now, feel free to pause the video if you want to think about this before we go through the answers. On Windows 8.1, one of the ways that you can browse all of your installed applications, and there's a lot of ways, but from this list, A, Apps List, B, Dash Pane, C, Dock, D, Windows Store. Dock and Dash Pane do not go with Windows 8.1. Windows Store does, but that's where you buy new applications or purchase new applications, so that's not where you can browse installed ones, so the answer is A, Apps List. Number 2, where can you see what applications are installed in Ubuntu Linux? A, Apps List, B, Dash Pane, C, Dock, D, Windows Store. For Linux, it would be dash pane. That's the one specifically for Linux. D is for Mac, apps list is for Windows, Windows Store is for Windows. Number 3, how do you install a modern app in Windows 8.1 or 10? A, from the control panel, B, from a downloaded executable file, C, from the store app, D, from the start menu and screen. If you want to install a modern app in Windows 8.1 or 10, then a modern app is another word for going to the online OS store. So you would go to the Windows Store app and do it for a modern app. Number 4, what's the purpose of an application patch? A, adding new features, B, removing the application, C, upgrading to a new version, D, correcting a problem. Now the main purpose of a patch is you really have two purposes here, is to correct a problem and add new features. However, a patch specifically, I always think about a patch for like a quilt. When you have a quilt and there's a hole in it, you want to fix that. Instead of getting a brand new quilt, you want to fix that, so you put a patch on it because there was a problem with the quilt. So a patch is to correct a problem. Number 5, what can you find out about an application by choosing Help and About? A, most recent data file used, B, supported extensions, C, application version number, D, Windows version. Help and About helps you to be able to identify with the application version number. We did this with Adobe Acrobat in this video. Number 6, how can you remove a Windows desktop application? A, from the control panel, B, from the store app, C, from the start menu start screen, D, from the dock. If you want to remove a Windows desktop application, the first place you need to go to is that central hub for all administrative duties on a computer, and that is the control panel. Number 7, which of these is a graphic format? A, PNG, B, PPTX, C, AVI, D, TAR. Graphic is another word for image. So they're saying which of these is an image format. And if you don't know, maybe you could do some process elimination to narrow it down. The one that is an image format is A, PNG. Remember, PPTX is for PowerPoint. That would be document. AVI is video. That would be under video and audio. And TAR, we talked about how all the different ARs are compressions. So that is TAR. The answer on number 7, though, is PNG. Number 8, which of these is a productivity application? A, Microsoft Excel, B, Candy Crush, C, Windows Firewall, D, Spotify. It's asking which one helps you to be able to get things done. And out of all this list, the things where you want to get things done is Microsoft Excel. They all have an argument for getting things done. Yep, you can get things done by clearing out your candy in Candy Crush, and that's productive, kind of. They're talking about work-based or business-oriented, so that would be a Microsoft Excel. Number 9, which of these is a collaboration application? A, TurboTax, B, Microsoft Word, C, SharePoint, D, Semantic Endpoint Protection. Collaboration is an application that allows you to work with at least one other person. So of these options, SharePoint allows you to be able to work with at least one other person. And finally, number 10, which of these is a compression format? A, WAV, B, TXT, C, XLS, D, RAR. The answer to this is RAR. WAV is wave or audio. I always remember, because if you think about like a visual display of sound waves, it kind of goes up and down like a sine or cosine wave, so that's for audio. B, a text, is for document. XLS is Excel spreadsheet, that's also document, and the answer is D, RAR, for compression. All right, that's all the questions we're going to go through. Feel free to study this video again if you need help with the Chapter 9 information. We will go through the remaining chapters coming up. Again, feel free to leave me a comment if you have questions or comments over anything down below, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me, and as always, keep on keeping on.